Good morning in North Carolina and good evening here in Bustleton, Western Australia. It's Claire O'Berry and Dying Your Way podcast. And I am so delighted this evening to introduce you to someone who is just one of the most innovative people I know that's in the death and dying movement, Kimberly C. Paul. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hey, how are you?
So
Thanks for having me on.
Oh gosh, I'm honored. I am so honored. Okay, so you're an author, you're a podcaster, you're a keynote speaker and TED talker. I love your TED talk.
Oh,
and one of the things that really impressed me is you're an award-winning marketer. That was great. And then I have to say, really, I said at the beginning, you are just one of the most creative influencers that I can think of, if not the most creative influencer I know.
Oh, wow.
in the death and dying movement.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you take
I think creativity is just a key part of, I was born with that. And a lot of people are like, how do you come up with that idea? I'm like, I have no idea.
It's in you.
It is, yeah, it is. And it just makes work and whatever I'm doing a lot more fun for me.
Well, we have so many of your projects that we're going to get into and talk about, but I want to just get, number one, how did you go from being production at Saturday Night Live to hospice to touring, the whole continental United States in your Live Well, Die Well tour?
Sure. That's not the like regular career path. Well, first of all, I was a peon on an apprentice on Saturday Night Live, and
that's production.
Yeah, I mean the grunt behind it all. I worked in the talent department with Marcy Klein back in the day in the mid '90s, and went on then to CBS daytime casting. I was the assistant to Allison Renzel, and was, really, we had shows in New York and Los Angeles, and after a couple of years with CBS, I decided to move back to North Carolina. Stayed for about a year or so in Raleigh. Met a boy, fell in love for the very first time, and he got into the FBI Academy, and I got a call from Wilmington, North Carolina about some production happenings in Wilmington. One of the shows was Dawson's Creek, and so I decided to head down, and when I arrived, they were on hiatus, and I thought, I had just lost my grandmother with breast cancer, and I thought I would go to an organization that helped my family. And so, I decided to go check into HoeSpice and see if they needed a volunteer. And, I arrived and they said, first of all, you're mispronouncing it. It's hospice, not HoeSpice. And I'm like, great, good tip. And then they put me in a room where I thought I was interviewing to be a volunteer, and it was actually a paid position to oversee the volunteers. So after the interview, they hired me, and I was like, could I do this for a while and then go back to television and film? And I was like, sure, why not? I'm done with struggling, with doing odd jobs. Yeah. So I was like, sure. In that 5 or 6 months, it ended up being about 17 years. So, yeah, when you're a creative or a storyteller, you follow the story. Yeah. And what I found was really rich and relevant stories at the bedside of the dying. And I tried to add all my production experience with design thinking and how do you bring that to a very dark subject that no one wants to talk about? Right. And so I wanted to put color around death. And so really we changed our marketing philosophy of, instead of telling them what we can do for people, we started telling the stories of the patients. And so I found myself really journaling and following these individuals from, you know, some really hard times in their lives to, you know, where they are now facing end of life. And they've taught me a lot about what they regretted, which
Yeah.
teaches me about how to live, if it's you know, fitting. But I really learned at the bedside more about life than I did about death. And I found the impact of some of these people that were just in my life for a very, very short time having the biggest impact on my life long term. And after 17 years, I just got stymied. I was bored. You know, it became as the volunteer coordinator, I went up to VP of Communications and Outreach and had the ability to work with a CEO that was like, hey, here's a canvas, paint it any way you want to.
Wow.
And when she retired, it was almost like, I felt, and I joked with her all 17 years, when you retire, I'm retiring. And it ended up being about the same time. And I decided, you know, taking a leap. I was sort of confused about the Medicare benefit in the United States, how narrow it was, and how Medicare was asking patients and families facing end of life to convert to a reimbursement stream instead of the services really being catered to those who were facing end of life and their families. And there was a particular woman, she was, I believe, in her late 90s, over 100, I think 102 maybe. And we discharged her because she got well. And 2 weeks later, she was in the ER and she died in the hospital. And I felt like the hospice, Dame Cicely Saunders hospice, that I really fell in love with, was slipping through my fingers.
Right.
And I was watching it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how can I create something that I can really protect Dame Cicely Saunders Hospice? And I couldn't do it as the VP of a local nonprofit hospice, because, as you know, a lot of hospices, they don't want national attention. They don't want to challenge Medicare. They're happy with the scraps they get from Longshank's table, you know. But I wanted more. I wanted more for the patients and families. I wanted more, especially for the staff, because as we grew our organization, when I got on, we were about 50 patients, and we grew to over 700 collective hospice and palliative care patients. And the one thing that we did very poorly was we left the staff behind.
But
And
you're
so,
not talking about 700 hospice patients at once. Really?
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God. Oh my
Yeah, I mean, now collectively palliative and hospice, but yeah, we had, you know, 600 hospice patients,
Wow.
and 200 palliative care patients. And so, yeah, we really did a lot of community education and really got ingrained into the community. We were a nonprofit, and we had this mission-driven mentality. We worked, you know, there were some senior leaders that I worked with all 17 years. And I mean, some of my staff were with me for 15 years. So you can see, you know, that the richness of what we were doing was not only benefiting patients and families, but we were growing and serving more people. But I do believe that we made some mistakes, like any organization does, and we left the clinical staff behind as we grew. And so when I left, it became this badge of I'm never going to do that again. And how do I bring more awareness, more reimbursement, less regulations, and allow nurses and chaplains and social workers and CNAs and physicians to practice end of life outside of this medical model, where we in the United States are just so pushing it toward that medical model. When I first started in hospice, our nurses did not wear scrubs. They wore clothes. And I know that the dynamics of hospice patients have changed. They're sicker now, but still, it was, how do we stay out of that medical model?
You know,
And
they changed, and I'm not sure, you would probably know what happened, but my mother got in hospice in 2005, and she was on it for 6 years with Alzheimer's. Started out with a condition of failure to thrive, and then it was just maybe in the last year that she got it because of Alzheimer's. And then my father, he had to go on and off it, but we got the benefits of it for 2.5 years. And they seem to be much stricter now about that. They only go in the last few days. I mean,
yeah, for some reason, I believe because certain organizations took advantage of a lot of patients that probably truly did not qualify for the hospice benefit. And but I say this, you know, you can't let one bad apple destroy the entire barrel.
well, and
You
I'll
got
just say and strongly that my mother needed all 6 years of that. You know,
hmm
she really did. And I, if I
And
was
so
like,
did you.
yeah,
And so did you.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
absolutely. And you know, when they took failure to thrive away, you know, but you have to understand the philosophy of America. We're
yeah,
capitalist, and if we can make money off of anything, we're going to figure that out. And so, what Medicare saw was a lot of people creating hospice organizations to make money, because they saw an influx of cash when it came to hospice patients. And really, hospice was not, that was not its main focus. Its main focus was to break even, you know, take care, creating another environment so people don't have to die in the hospital. They
yeah.
can die in their home with visiting hours 24 hours a day, and things like that. And so yeah, I think Medicare saw people getting rich, and so they became more strict, which I say, you know, maybe that's the problem. And I'm looking and working with several people who live in Canada, and I'm looking at how their socialized model works at end of life. And I'm thinking, you know, I don't care about the rest of the medical healthcare. I care
Mhm.
about end of life.
Right.
And what I'm trying to do is, how do we create stop signs in intersections that we continue to have head-on collisions?
Yeah.
You know, and that's with physicians, that's with family members, that's with hospices, that's with palliative care people. You know, how do we create stop signs? And us Americans tend to look at money to pause. So if an oncologist was treating someone with a terminal illness
Mm.
and they died as they were treating him, and knowing that, hey, if you treat someone with a terminal illness and they die on chemotherapy, you have to pay that back to Medicare, suddenly it creates a stop sign to say, am I doing the right thing? You know, is this benefiting the patient, or am I not facing the reality and the truth and having an open conversation with the family? Even with nursing homes, you know, they're skilling people in nursing homes because they get a little bit more care, it's higher reimbursement. But if someone dies on skilled days within a nursing home, why isn't that nursing home being, you know, paying back Medicare to create more of a reimbursement, to take care of staff at end of life, because it's different. I mean, I see people leaving this field because of compassion fatigue, not burnout, compassion fatigue,
Mm.
left and right. So I want to really I feel very selfish by saying this, but I really want to take care of the staff, because I want those people who are born to do this at my bedside and my father's
Yeah,
bedside.
yeah, yeah. I was interviewing a doctor last week from in this Bustleton area, Dr. Sarah Moore, and she's a doctor of integrative medicine, you know, and she has palliative care patients, you know, end stage patients, but it's and yeah, the medical model is completely different here. Like, you don't pay for anything, but But we really started like jamming on this idea about, integrative care and palliative care is really the same thing.
Hmm.
And we get so hung up on this word is hospice, and or how did you say it? Hospice.
HoeSpice.
HoeSpice. This is HoeSpice. This is palliative care. But then there's integrative care, which is also interdisciplinarian. And, we just were like going, what if from womb to tomb, people were like having that kind of model throughout their lives, that interdisciplinary model of care. So when those transitions, for whatever reason, happen to any of us, it's just a seamless transition. And you don't have to prove anything or do anything or qualify, or it's just like, this is the care you get and it's free. That's what
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't have a system to measure integrity in the United States. We don't understand, we don't know if the oncologist is saying more treatment because this is what the patient wants, or even though it's not going to do any good, or if it's because reimbursement, he gets more money. So, I mean, there's nowhere to measure that, his integrity, when it comes to that. And so it's left up that when someone with end-stage cancer is being radiated to death, if they were just on comfort measures, would they have lived longer? But I think also we Americans, we have a really hard time with truth, with reality, with acknowledging that the life that I leave, this body, this breath that I'm able to talk to you with, will one day be decaying. And I try to tell people, I'm not a cheerleader for death, but I also am not someone that is going to run from it. I think when I see the bookmarks in the beginning and the end, it makes me live more fully today. And I compare it to vacation. People go to, because when I went to Fiji years ago, I was like 10, 12 days in Fiji, and I was like, we were up early, we went to bed late, we were exhausted when we got back. It's like we needed a vacation from our vacation. And I was like, why am I so exhausted? And I said, well, I thought about it for a long time. I'm like, well, we pushed ourselves really hard every day because we knew it was going to end.
Yeah.
And we might not ever see this place again. So we pushed it. And my question is, why do we not do that with our lives? We know it's going to end, but we tend to not push it, not race towards something or do something that lights our hair on fire.
Yeah.
And we tend to settle, thinking that we always have tomorrow. And I'm saying all I am guaranteed is today.
Yes.
So it makes me want to get up early to see the sunset. It makes me, want to walk my dog one more time, just in case that I go to sleep tonight and I don't wake up.
That's a great way to live life. Hey, listen, I want to, because I don't really know that much about it, and I really want to hear about it because I've already registered for October the 8th. So I want you to tell us about I want to tell us about your movie. I'm so looking forward to it. I'm going to say it at the end too, but I'm just going to say it now, that this is a movie called The Elephant in the Room, and it's going to be on Amazon Prime, October the 8th. So just
well, it's actually on Prime now. You can watch it now.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we're trying to get people to watch the movie ahead of time, or even on the day. But I'm going to bring the cast on a Zoom call, so you can really talk to the cast behind making this film. And what's crazy is that Bonnie Freeman, a nurse practitioner in Los Angeles, wrote a book, Resilient Hearts, that then a screenplay that became The Elephant in the Room. And she died unexpectedly before the film was finished. And so the cast, who some of them are actual social workers, only a few are really trained actors. This was their love project for Bonnie, because Bonnie could convince you to do anything. I remember the last time I talked to her on the phone, she's like, look, I have this movie. We just finished filming. It's in post-production. I want to come on your podcast, promote it. And I'm like, yeah, great. And then I never heard from her again. And then this guy called Nico, out of the blue, emails me and says, look, Bonnie died. And he was the main character in the film. And he goes, I'm just a producer and actor, but I just feel like this is part of her legacy. And so Nico and I became really close. And I feel like we're brother and sister because I just believe in who he is.
Yeah.
And when the movie came out, they were putting it in festivals. It started winning some things, and then they landed a distribution deal, and it became on Amazon. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, it's free to watch. If you're not, it only costs like $1.99. But it's a fabulous, fabulous film about the looking through the eyes of the practitioner, and can we treat our patients differently when it comes to the end of life. And it's just an amazing movie, but I really think what makes this movie is the people that are in it. The social worker in this movie is the actual social worker at the hospital in Los Angeles. And I thought she was an actress. That's how good she was. But it's like they had this love project with Bonnie and gave time to Bonnie to create this film. And here it is on Amazon. And, I've been working with Nico almost 2.5 years thinking this film was only going to be in festivals. They landed this distribution deal and everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe you got the whole cast to come on. And I was like, well, it's sort of a long story, but we've been through thick and thin together. And I've been a big proponent of supporting Bonnie and her vision long after her death. So she'd be so proud.
Well,
So proud of the crew.
I can't wait to see it. I thought it was just on
It's
that.
amazing.
Okay, well, I wish I would have known that it was already up, or I would have looked at it beforehand. But oh gosh,
yeah. What I'm going to try to do it's a great
people can see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've posted the trailer, but I guess I need to go online and really say, hey, Elephant in the Room is on Amazon Prime right now, and you can watch it, and then meet the cast on October 8th. So we're really trying to get them to watch the movie and then come and ask questions. And we've had over close to 150 people already register. And that was like in the first 48 hours. So I want as many people to help me and help the cast, Nico and her husband who directed it, and many other people who were a part of this project behind the scenes, can we collectively come together and really be part of Bonnie's legacy. She'd be so proud of these cast members.
I mean, I haven't seen it yet, and I can understand Bonnie's legacy, but what is the outcome that you think or that you want after people have seen this movie? What is the outcome or the takeaway that you want people to have?
I really feel that art is a great venue when it comes to talking about hard subjects. And I think that if we can write a review on Amazon, if we can rate the movie on Amazon, and I'm not telling you to rate 5-star, rate it to how you feel it was, then Amazon, Netflix, and everyone else is going to be like, maybe we need more stuff like this.
Yeah.
And so it really is, how do we keep the door cracked and widen the doorway to tell Hollywood, hey, art is a really great way to introduce end of life. And I mean, there's several films out there, but to really tell the staff story. And it really, when I first saw it, it made me want to live more boldly, because I will be dying one day. And when you watch people at their end of life and the families interact, it's very human to think of your own family, to think of your own end of life. And so if we can really inspire people to watch this, maybe we can inspire them to not only talk and have conversations about planning for end of life, but actually do it and bring and normalize this, hey, this conversation, that it's not so taboo, that let's bring it out of the closet and really have an open conversation about it.
You know,
That's the goal.
Thank you for that. I mean, when I look at the your CV, your resume, or all of the arc of what you've done, it seems like the theme in your work, started even in 2008, was about beginning the conversation, having that conversation, the advanced planning, having the just talking to your doctor, to your family, you know, how important that is. That seems to be always a theme of your work that I see.
Yeah, and I think that really changed in 2004. That FBI guy that I fell in love with, I found out that he died of cancer, and he wanted to protect me and not talk about it. And so I found out years after we had broken up, and I reconnected with the family, and it was, of course, I thought the boy didn't love me. And then you find out the boy was trying to protect me.
Oh.
And then, but you're still talking to the person that wasn't told the truth.
Yeah.
And I keep joking with people, I'm sure he's going to be at the pearly gates when I show up, and I'm going to, of course, make out with him, but then I'm going to punch him in the face, because I'm just like, it could have been so different. And I think things happen in your life that end up creating momentum and a very powerful message that becomes your theme. And I'm the girl that wasn't told the truth. And would my grief have been different? Or would, if we were open and honest about that, where would we have been? And instead of looking back, why not use the story to help others see that the girlfriend wanted the truth? And if that helps someone to sit down and say, hey,
Yeah.
I might not live through this diagnosis. What needs to be said? And so that really catapulted me in this vehicle of truth matters when it comes to end of life. Even if it's hard to hear, you must know. And I believe the patient, I hear in the back of my head, so many families like, what if my mom didn't want to know the truth? Well, too bad, because my job as a physician is to tell the truth so you can be educated on what you need to do moving forward. And if we don't know reality, how can we make the best decisions on treatment or non-treatment? Or I want this, if that treatment's going to make me sick, or I can't talk because the blisters in my mouth. I mean, how can we come together collectively and do the right thing at the right time, with the truth? And so I believe that's the theme that you see, is because of that experience with Rob, that I'm an advocate for the truth, no matter how hard it is.
You started your tour, your Live Well, Die Well tour at his parents' house, right?
Yeah, I did. After I left hospice, I decided that, as a marketing person, I was looking at, what is a venue that is sort of popular, that is growing in viewer and readership. And the only thing that was growing was something called a podcast. And I was like, podcast, no video, audio. And I was like, maybe that's what I need to do, is to have New York Times bestselling authors on here about end of life, but also my neighbor who struggled with her husband with dementia, that had no resources, didn't qualify. Those stories are just as important to me as that story on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
And so how do we bridge that? And so I started a podcast, never thinking anyone would listen. And it became, I think it was like one of the first 3 or 4 podcasts about end of life. And I wanted it to be very Terry Gross, you know what I mean? I wanted it to be just a conversation
Yeah.
that you know, you could be a fly if you're like, yeah, that's not, or man, that's interesting, let me look into it. Something that I can sneak my way into your house and no one can know you're listening, but I can help you hear some very horrific stories that might change how you deal with stuff, or some really cool stories that will inspire you to live more fully.
Yeah.
So as I was coming off of my first, or in the midst of my first season, I decided to really write about my experience with about 15 patients. There are 15 stories in my book called Bridging the Gap. And I wanted the stories to be told because I did not want the stories to die with me.
Mm.
I thought they were such a huge impact on my life that I needed to write about them. But this is the crazy thing. As a creative, I wanted it to be advanced care planning book, how to. And when I started writing it, it was not working. And I said, what inspires me to even tell these stories? And it came back to the stories that I heard. And so what I thought the book was going to be ended up totally changing because of the stories. And what I found myself when I was writing, and it took me about 4 or 5 months to write the book, and I was crying every day. And a
Mm.
friend of mine who's a nurse came over and she goes, you know, we haven't seen you. I know you're writing this book. And my little eyes were puffy, and she goes, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I'm having, I think, a breakdown. And she looked at me and she goes, oh my gosh, you were grieving the first time for these people.
Oh.
I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Because I was struggling and I was reliving the stories. And I mean, I never knew the impact until I started writing, until I wrote about them, and then just collapsed to my knees to
Yeah.
realize, oh my gosh, these people who were only in my life for a small amount of time have had the biggest impact on
Yeah.
my life. And it was a time that I finally embraced, that I was in this whole grief stricken and compassion fatigue in this field, and writing was a way to deal with my own grief. So the book came out, and I don't know if you've heard about another book called Driving Miss Norma. It's a great book. Um, and the couple that wrote it, it was about Tim's mom, and they were living in an RV, and they encouraged the mom to come and travel the last year of her life. And they had, Miss Norma had passed away, and they had sold the RV and bought a boat, and they were coming outside of, they were doing the Great Michigan Loop, and they were on the intercoastal of North Carolina right as I finished my book. And they're like, come out and have dinner with us on the boat. I'm like, okay. And I remember Tim saying, I have a great idea. You should buy an RV, go state to state, and tell these stories. I'm like, there's no way in hell.
Uh,
There's no way in hell I would ever do anything like that. And it, I think the following weekend I was with a college friend, and I was telling her, you know, they were saying, hey, you know, go buy an RV and go travel the country and tell your stories. And she just started laughing. You know, those college friends who can laugh in the most inappropriate spaces and humble you because they have pictures that aren't on Facebook, and you want to keep it that way. So you let them have some liberties
yeah.
to kind of like put you in your place. And so we were just laughing about it. And I doubled down. I was like, until Jesus himself shows me a burning bush, there is no way I would ever do this. So she was a smoker. And when we went out on the front porch, she lit her cigarette, and her neighbor had a, you know, gasoline fluid, and he was spraying it on this azalea bush. And within a second, he struck a match, and this azalea bush was on fire. And Sally's like, um, good luck on your tour. And I was like, holy shit. And so I went over to the guy. I was like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm burning a bush." I'm like, and this guy didn't know me from Adam. He's like, "What?" I was like, I see that you're burning this bush, but why now?" And he went on to the story about, my wife's on me. I never finished my honey-do list, and the World Series is getting ready to come on, and I have a matter of 10 minutes to burn this bush down. So I thought this was the best way to do it. And I told him, and he barely looked at me. He's like, "Well, good luck on your tour." And within 2 weeks, I had bought the RV and rented out my house, and was thinking, what else do I need to do? And I was walking my dog Haven in Wallace Park in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I got this call from Vermont. First of all, I don't know anybody in Vermont. It snows there. And I don't even talk to anybody in Vermont. But I answered the phone, and it happened to be Roberta McDonald from Cabot Cheese. And she goes, "I heard about your tour." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "How? What?" I didn't do any press releases. And she goes, "I think we want to sponsor you." I'm like, "What? Like money?" And she goes, "Yes, I think you should get more sponsors, and we'll wrap your RV with the sponsors. Um, and we'll support you financially, as well as send cheese to all your speaking engagements." And I was just like, all right, first of all, what does cheese have to do with end of life? And I mean, there's got to be a connection there. And she said this, which was brilliant. She goes, "Well, we're a co-op. We have dairy farmers that own us, and we raise our children on a farm from a very young age, teaching them that all living things die. And so we thought we might could help out with the conversation." And I was like, "Yes, you can. Yes, you can."
Wow.
And so they became the sponsor. And when you have like a national cheese company,
Yeah.
then it opens the door with everybody else coming on board. By the time I ended the tour, it was 34 sponsors that
Wow.
I had supporting me on this tour. We were going to drive to 49 states, because I can't drive to Hawaii. But we ended up in Portland, Oregon, state number 45,
Yeah.
and COVID-19 hit.
Wow.
And we decided um, to end the driving tour, make our way back to North Carolina, close to family members who have some chronic illnesses that have been affected by COVID, and be close by. And we have still 4 states to visit, which are Alaska, Michigan, Utah, Montana, and Hawaii. And I will fly to their states and continue the Live Well, Die Well tour. But the whole purpose is to rally the people in my field to meet me in Washington, to tell their stories to people who are creating the regulations and the laws that we have to practice by. Because I felt like if we tell the stories of our patients, of how difficult it is to take care of those at the end of life, maybe we could change policy. And now I wanted it to be March 4th, 2021, because I wanted to march forward,
Yeah.
because I wanted an action date. But what we're probably going to do, because of the pandemic, and we're not sure when this is going to be our new normal, but when we're going to go back to some similar normacy way of life, we're probably going to do a lot of almost StoryCorps videos, as well as a YouTube channel, to really tell the stories of the CNA and the nurses. So we're in a project, and it's called Live Well, Die Well, Overflow. Like the tour is overflowing with all of these stories.
Yeah.
So we're trying to capture them, and hopefully it will crack the door open. So maybe even in 2022, we're able to have that congressional hearing and just tell the story. And if it affects the way you create laws and regulations, so be it, as long as the people who are in this field have that opportunity to share.
Yeah, and that's what needs to happen on a public policy level, and
Absolutely.
and when you're talking to those policymakers, you know, that they are going to be in that position at some point themselves. So chop,
Yeah,
chop.
it's a bipartisan issue. I mean, we're all going to get there, and it's really, how can we create stop signs within this intersection together, collectively?
Yeah, it is the great equalizer. And another thing that, you know, I think struck me about your work is how through traveling all the different states and meeting with so many different people with honestly some polarizing points of view and different points of view, that you have the ability to bridge the gap. The name of your book.
Well,
No, really, you do.
yeah, well, the one thing I wanted was, I didn't want an organization to pay me. I wanted to struggle financially with some supporters to barely make the tour happen, because I believe that when you're paid by someone, there's motivation behind that. So I'm going to show up to Congress saying that this is what I've risked to learn from every state, but no one's paying me to do this except, you know, the memory of my boyfriend passing at 30, the age of 30, and then hearing and the stories that I've collected in all 50 states. And I think since we've delayed this congressional hearing, I really feel like I want to touch base with all the individuals that are coming into the office. And you know, it's such a tremendous, crazy time in America with the, you know, racism, with the election coming, with the pandemic, that, you know, I always look for direction from the universe, and maybe it's just not our time, because I don't want to be sidelined by something that we need to be paying more attention to, because that we've got to deal with this pandemic. We've got to deal with the racism that's happening for decades and decades and decades. How we do not see people based on their character, and instead of their color, I have no idea. And I believe that it's time to level the playing field, and realize that you know, all lives matter, but right now, Black lives matter the most too, because we have not honored them. You know, we're talking about statues coming down, but I'm just saying, instead of taking down statues, put up statues of Harriet Tubman and everybody who's been a part of our history.
Let
African
them have
Americans
equal access to health.
equal access. Absolutely. It's like, how do we make healthcare a right and not a privilege?
It is every place else in the world. It is.
Well, I believe we make too much money. We're capitalist. You know, how do we make money? And until that one person who has the authority to change things are affected by it, then we've got to tell our story. And so that's really important to me. Plus, I do feel like in part of this reimbursement, we've got to have room that no one works 40 hours in the end of life. 25 to 28 hours is enough for someone at the bedside of the dying. They have got to have work-life balance to maintain their love for the job, but also their love for life. You know, there's a lot of things that I feel that the staff in this end-of-life field needs. And especially within hospice, mandatory bereavement. These people see a lot of deaths, and within palliative care as well. I mean, how do we create some space for these people to deal with what they see as a human being instead of a robot? That's really important to me as well.
Well, I have a lot of ideas. We'll have to talk some more, because I have so many ideas.
Yay! Yeah.
That's been really one of the great things about traveling, is that I've been able to see different approaches to death and dying in different countries. And, you know, I'm not saying everything in Australia is perfect by any means, but, you know, the people shouldn't have to be bankrupt because they need, you know, to get a knee replacement. whatever.
Yeah, or they're 36 and have a brain tumor, and
Right.
they've now maxed out their credit cards, and they have 3 young children under the age of 8,
Yeah.
and they're thinking, "What? I'm just trying to survive this and see my kids grow old." I mean,
Yeah.
there's certain things that are just nonsensical.
Yeah. Well, let's pray. Pray really, really hard. And I'm going to let you go, but I'm going to see you again because we're both going to be on the Beautiful Dying Expo. And so I'm just going to give a thing about that. That's November the 13th through the 15th. And you're going to be a keynote speaker. And
Yeah, I'm actually going to like host it, like MC the whole event.
oh, good.
So yeah, so I'm really Michelle Little with it's a really great forum, and you know they've done a lot of work trying to make it an in-person event the first year, and now it's a virtual event. So it really is opened up for everyone to attend.
Yeah, well, and I'm participating in it, and I'm really looking
Yay.
forward to how that's going to shake out. But so the best way for people to get hold of you is at deathbydesign.com. Is that
Yeah,
a good
that's
way to
where
get hold of you if they want to?
absolutely, and you can drop me. I welcome any guest who has a story onto my podcast. You don't have to be anyone. I'm not anyone. So people will be like, "Hey, I have a story," and they pitch it to me. I'm like, "Well, of course you can come on my podcast."
Yeah.
So you can always connect with me through the contact page. You can order my books through that page, and I'll sign them for you. And I'm the one that knows the U.S. postal system, the people that shipping them by names. So I'm the one that takes it to the post office because I really want to know and make this an intimate experience for everyone. But yeah, please listen to Death by Design podcast. Check out my TED Talk. But just know that I am one of thousands of people in this field trying to make a difference. And I'm very proud to look around and see people like you and many others that are doing really great work as well.
Well, let's continue to pray. It's going to make a difference. I mean, there will be a tipping point where people are going to go, oh, I get it. And then the resources are going to be there and people will have access to it. I just hold that vision. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's what why we're doing this right now. It's because of that.
Absolutely. It's about human rights. And that's not only for the United States, but for the world.
For the world.
You know, how do we take care of the world? And I believe it's one community, one person at a time.
Yeah. I could talk to you forever. I'm going to let you go because we're going to talk again. So anyway.
Well, you know, I've never been to Australia, and so I do want to come. And I have a great friend who turned 50 last year, but I was on a book tour and couldn't make it. So if there's any opportunity that we could bridge the gap between the seas, let's do it.
Hey, I'm a block from the beach. You got your own bedroom.
Yay, cool. Well, I look forward to it.
All right, Kimberly, Paul, thank you so very much.
Thank you as well.